So thank you, Kyle, for introducing my mother. She's not the only one here. Also, we have my mother, which is Amelia's grandmother, and then we have Amelia, my daughter's godmother. Megan is here, and then Amelia's mother, Emily, is here. So we've got a whole lot of mothers in this place, I'm sure. So all kinds, shapes, varieties, all kinds. We're talking about a mother, though, today, right? We've been given this. We're talking about Mary, and Mary has been given a really interesting status in the church because it varies through so many of the different denominations. You know, she's got so many names, titles. She's called Mary, Queen of Heaven. She's called Mary, Mother of the Church. Saint Mary, Mary, Mother of God, as it says in our story. I read a joke about this concept online. It was pretty funny. So Peter's standing at the gates, and he's got his book, and Jesus comes marching up. And Jesus goes, "What are you doing, Peter?" And he goes, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "There are so many people in here. There's tons of riffraff in here," which I don't know if I really agree with that idea. But he says, how are they all getting in? And he goes, "Well, I don't know. I'm sending them away. They must be, I don't know what it is. They're getting in through the back gate." And he goes, "Wasn't there somebody watching that?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Who's watching?" And he goes, "Your mother." So, I don't know if I agree with the idea since, Jesus basically hung out exclusively with riffraff from our stories. But it says something about the perception we have of Mary, right? It says something about her character. Mary isn't God, but it seems that she's about as close as a human can get to this idea of complete righteousness. And she managed to do it without being inherently divine like her son Jesus. So I think that's why so many people pray to her. I think that's why so many people pray for her to intercede on their behalf. Prayers to her are thought to have maybe be heard more readily by Jesus. She understands our problems. She's a mother. She's like us. She's like our mother. She can talk to Jesus for us. One of my professors from UCF, he's Jewish, and he said, this thing you Christians do of praying to Mary, that doesn't sound so strange to me. No, and he goes, no, if he's a good Jewish boy, if his mother tells him to do something, he's going to do it. It's just traditional. So maybe that's what he's talking about, because she'll understand our plea. Now, Lutherans don't really pray to her that often. We don't speak of her that way, but we do agree that she is just this great image of godly devotion and servitude. We can't deny the fact that she appears to be set apart, even if she isn't divine. I think today's passage is one of those main reasons why we think that. She's agreeing to something so bold. Listen to those words. "Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." It is no small thing that she is agreeing to. She will bear a child. And she'll be bearing a child that was conceived before she was married. She's agreeing to a responsibility that could essentially get her killed. It could get her stoned. And if not stoned, she would certainly have to deal with the social scorn this undoubtedly would create. The other reason she seems set apart is pretty obvious. God set her apart. God chose her. God sent an angel and told her that they found favor in the Lord. She had found favor. My question, however, is why? How? What is it about her that makes her so favored? Does the text give us any evidence? Does it say anything really about it? There's no earlier description. I'm looking in our Bible. It doesn't say anything else except that God picked her and that she's a virgin and she's engaged to a man from the house of David. That's not really anything to support the idea that she's that different from any other young, poor girl of that time and place. He just appears to have picked her. Why Mary? I think that's the exact same question Mary's asking. Why me? Angel shows up and calls her favored, and Mary is stunned. She says nothing. Instead, it says she's troubled, she's afraid, she's perplexed. She ponders the angel's greeting in her heart and starts to try to reason and figure out what the angel is talking about. I think what she's doing is she's being a little skeptical, right? She's a little skeptical of this greeting because, to be honest, look at this situation. I'm going to speak of my own situation. I know when, say, my wife comes to me and says, and starts a statement off with, honey, you are the best husband in the world. I go, what does this mean? What is she getting at? Like, what's happening here? What is she going to do? Is she going to ask me to clean something up? Oh, does this have to do with Amelia, or did the dog do something terrible? Like, what is this? What am I going to have to do? I think that's Mary's response as well, because there's a problem with accepting that notion of being somehow favored. The statement's absurd. I'm not the greatest husband in the world. And for Mary, the statement is absurd. She's not favored. She's just a normal person. She says nothing. She's afraid. She ponders the greeting in her heart. In essence, what she's afraid of is the same thing I'm afraid of when Emily comes to me with this bold statement is, I think it's a trap. I think it's a trick. Or not malicious, but maybe closer to something like greasing the wheels, right? Mary, Queen of Heaven, is pondering that favored statement. She's the mother of the church, but she's skeptical, just like us. I think I would argue that is the typical response to God's grace. I'd argue that that's really the only way that we respond to that level of favorite, that word favored, to that message of grace. I mean, look at our history. When God's story with God's people began, he offered his favored people, his children, a message of hope. He delivered them out of Egypt. He gave them structure. He gave them guidelines. He offered life instead of death, freedom instead of captivity. But in the midst of their darkness, a message of life, a message of light, and he calls them favored. We've been given this message. We've been given the same message, a message to God, from God to those he favors. But we're skeptical. Because in reality, this promise of life and love in the midst of our disobedience just seems so impossible. It doesn't make sense. This is such good news. It's news that we witness daily. It makes us skeptical. It makes us afraid of a trap, because what's that statement? What's that little quip we learn when we're little? If something's too good to be true, what is it? Probably isn't. That's what's ingrained in us. That's our response to such an incredible message. But the good news today being revealed by this angel in our story, is that this is no trick. This is not Emily buttering me up, This isn't coming from a person with an agenda. It isn't coming from someone who seeks to grease the wheels. It's more than a greeting. It's more than a trick. It's a promise. It's a comforting word, a liberating word. God responds to our doubt, our reluctance. He responds to our skepticism and fear by saying to Mary, "Do not be afraid. You have found favor with God." Do not be afraid. You have found favor with God. In the midst of your doubt and fear, let me assure you, you are blessed. Let me assure you, you have found favor in the Lord. And now you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be great. He will be called Son of the Most High. His kingdom will have no end. What's so fantastic about the story today is not necessarily Mary's response. It's about that good news. This message that is not going to be stopped by doubt. This promise that will not be thwarted by our perceived notions of righteousness and piety. This promise will be fulfilled despite its being impossible. Mary points that out. She's a very good skeptic. She's just like us. She goes, "How on earth could this happen? How can I have a baby? I'm a virgin." And we're told, nothing will be impossible with God. And I think this is the big point of God's story here. Nothing. Not your doubt, not your skepticism, not your fear, not your reluctance, not your sinfulness, not your unworthiness. Are we hearing some Paul here? Neither life nor death, neither angels nor demons, neither present nor in the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth. Nothing will separate you from the love of God that is about to be revealed to you, Mary, in this child, Jesus Christ. Nothing is impossible. And that includes this virgin birth. Virgin birth. Mary's worried about how. But the angel is talking about God. This is bigger than virgin birth. This is more than Mary saying yes to the challenge, because let's be honest, by the words of the angel, Mary doesn't seem to have much of a choice in the matter, does she? It's not like the angel shows up and goes, Mary, future mother of God, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to bear. It doesn't happen. He says, this is, you have, you will. It will be a reality. The impossible will happen. What this is just another story about the wondrously impossible things that God is going to do in and through this child. Isn't that incredible? We know this isn't the only impossible thing he's going to do. He isn't only granting Mary with a child, raising her to the status of Mother of God, with zero qualifications or explanation, but through Jesus, he intends to forgive our sins. He will heal the sick by touching them. He'll restore sight to the blind. He performs many impossible deeds, multiplying loaves and fishes. And like a good Jewish boy, he does as his mother says, and he turns the water into wine at the wedding. Saves the day. Jesus even goes so far as to do that more impossible thing where he raises the dead to new life. Impossible acts. All of these, of course, lead up to the most wonderful and even more astonishing impossibility, which of course is the resurrection of Jesus himself from the dead. It's that unbelievable moment in the cross where God says, in spite of your disobedience, despite our constant attempts to separate ourselves from him, despite our unquenchable thirst for death, God says, I will go there first. I will travel through the gates of hell to prove there is nowhere I can't go. There is nothing I can't do, and there is nothing that will separate you from me. Nothing is impossible with God. In the cross, God is telling each and every one of us, saints, sinners, those mourning, those hiding, those ready or not, on the cross, Christ essentially is telling us, do not be afraid. You have found favor with God. Now, Mary's response is inspiring, but so is the message being delivered by the angel, and sometimes I think we skim past it too quickly. Greetings, favored ones. Do not be afraid. You have found favor with God. When we hear that statement through the lens of the cross, it becomes a lot easier possibly to model Mary's courageous statement of faith, because it truly is a bold thing she's saying, but it may become a bit easier. Be as bold in saying that in our lives, the bottom of those pits at the foot of our own crosses, maybe it becomes easier when we look through the cross to say, here am I, servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word. Because if this story tells me anything, it's that God's grace, God's good news, this message, Emmanuel, it's coming whether we're ready or not. It's coming whether we're worthy or not. It's coming whether I understand it or not. And that is truly good news. Amen.